The Motion 3 plugin by Mt Mograph has honestly changed so much of my workflow, and so I just had to create a video about it. I'm going to run through each feature of the plugin one by one. The project for this tutorial will be available for download in the description. Let's jump in. So the Animo feature allows you to group your animations together. So for example here we have these shapes which are moving like this. And if we wanted to control that animation as like one single animation, we can group it together by selecting all the keyframes that we've animated, and we can click Animo. And then we can call it something, let's call it shapes, and then press Animo. And now we've got one null layer with two keyframes going from 0 to 100%, and that kind of controls the animation. So we could shorten the animation by dragging this keyframe back, and then all of the layers move more quickly. We can also change the easing of these. So if we go back to the easing presets window on Motion 3 and click like an extreme easing like this, see, that looks way cooler now. I think that's so cool. Okay, and then if you go to the effects panel for that null, you can see under loop, you can enable loop, and now that's going to loop your animation like this. So it's basically the equivalent of loop out expression, except it's for all of your layers, and it's just neater. You can even change it to ping pong down here, and that's really cool. So it's going to play it once in the right direction, and then it's going to play it in reverse afterwards. I think that's so cool as well. Blend allows you to smooth out your animations. So if you see this animation here with the ball that's moving in a kind of S shape, we can smooth that animation out by clicking on the ball, click position, and you click blend. And you can see this white line that I've traced the movement with is now sort of averaging out a bit the movement. So if we press E and we open up the blend effect and we increase the smoothness to like 8, you can see it's averaging out even more now, so it's almost a straight line. Break allows you to break apart layers which have multiple groups. So for instance, this shape layer in here, if you open it up, it has 4 groups in it. So if you click this layer and you click break, it hides the original layer and it just adds 4 separate layers now. And you can do the same with Illustrator files. So if this layer here is an Illustrator layer, if I click break, it's going to break that one into multiple parts as well, multiple different shape layers. The way you used to do that is to right click the layer and you would click create shapes from vector layer. It saves you a few clicks. Oh, that's some nice coffee. So the burst modifier allows you to create some cool bursts like this. To start, you can simply click the burst tool and then you get the burst here. So you can tweak the number of little cylinders within the burst. You can tweak the distance from center. You can tweak various like offset properties. You can link the height and the width, so you can create sort of circular bursts instead of cylindrical ones. You can use this sequence modifier to create some cool effects. So for instance, you can sort of make it look like it's a 3D spiral using that. And then you can change the color of the fill and stroke in here. The clone tool allows you to easily copy and paste keyframes in a way that you wouldn't be able to do before. So for instance here, if I wanted to keyframe these squares to move to the right and then also move back to the left, I would want to highlight these keyframes, Control C, move my playhead to the end, and Control V. But what that does is it just pastes all 4 layers instead. So as far as I know, there's not really any way to do this in default After Effects aside from just individually grabbing this keyframe, Control V, grabbing this keyframe, Control V. It's really tedious. So if you highlight all of those keyframes and you click clone, boom, it adds all of those keyframes to the end. And now we've got that nice looping animation. The cloth tool allows you to create some cool cloth-like animations. So we're going to add a cape to this character here. His name is Billy. So here we've got a really basic looking cape. It doesn't really even look like a cape. So we're going to add some life to it. So if we click on the cape and we add some default puppet pins to this cape. So let's add 2 up here and maybe a few down here. The more you add, the more fluid it will look, but the more you add, it will also increase the processing time. So now that we've got some puppet pins in there, if we click cloth and then we click here, so we can see here it's added a new layer here. And this is going to hold all of the properties for the cloth. So if we open up global, in fact let's open them up here in the effect controls panel. So to make the cloth move, we need to add some dynamics, which is basically adding a kind of wiggle to each of the pins. So if we open up the position effect here, and we open up advanced and then dynamics, and then we enable dynamics, we can see now that it is kind of moving around quite realistically, but the problem is it's not being fixed to the character. So we need to fix part of the cloth to the character. So to do that, if we unshy all the pins here, and we want to sort of make sure that these two top pins stay where they are and the rest of them can move as they want. So if we open up the effects for both of those pins, and we go to position, and we go to magnetism, and we press enable, and we press mirrored, and we do the same for the other one, magnetism, enable, mirrored, those two pins will stay where they are, and the rest of them will fly about in the wind. And there you go, Billy's got a nice lovely cape. Let's start out with a simple animation like this. And we want to delay the animations. So if we pull up the position keyframes for all three of those squares, and we highlight them, and we click delay, and then we click delay here. And now they are quite nicely delayed there. And if we want to make them look a bit smoother, we can add some easing. We can add some more extreme easing. And there we go. So dynamics is literally just the wiggle expression, except you don't have to write expressions anymore. So if we click these layers and we add dynamics to them, we have to select their position property first, and then we select dynamics. Now they're going to all sort of wiggle around like that, but they're all wiggling in the same way, which is not what we want. So if we open up the effects panel for all of these, and we just change the seed to something else, but if you change that, they'll all animate differently. Sort of the RNG generator for each of them. See, now they're all wiggling around nicely. But let's say we don't want them to wiggle that much. We can turn down the amount to say 50 for the square. And now the square is not wiggling as much. And let's turn down the frequency for the circle, for instance. Or maybe turn it up to 4. Now the circle's going to be a lot more quick. Echo allows you to create a trail effect for your animations. So for example, if we have this circle moving across the screen, if we click echo, and let's choose to put all of the echoes into a pre-comp, and we're going to generate 11 echoes, and we'll call them trail, and then we click echo. Now you can see we've got a bunch of extra ones following it. And we can modify the settings for that if we go to the effects panel, and we can change the delay to what we want. So if we wanted it to be more like this, you can more clearly see each circle, whereas if we wanted it to be like 10 maybe, shorter trail but less division between each circle. You can change the color, which will add a cool tint for each of the colors following. And then you can change the seed of that to kind of tweak the colors. It's very, very cool. Excite allows you to add some inertia to your animations. And by inertia, I kind of mean a little bounce. So if we take this animation of a square, where it's just moving from one point to another, and we select its position property, and we click Excite, now we play the animation, you can see now it kind of bounces at the end of its movement. And you can tweak the strength of that, so if we wanted it to bounce a lot more, we could up the bounce property to 80, let's say, which increases the sort of frequency of the bounce. If we wanted to overshoot more, to move past the point more, there you go. And if we wanted it to be not too extreme, let's up the friction, maybe set the bounce back to what it was before, same with the overshoot, and now you should get a much more subtle bounce like that. Now Falloff is really interesting. So Falloff allows you to trigger certain animations when you hover over them with the Falloff controller. So you can see here these circles are expanding as I drag my Falloff over them. Let's say we want to recreate this, so we want to make these circles scale up as we drag the Falloff controller over them. So to do that, we select one of them, and we click scale, and then we select the rest of them, and then we click Falloff, and that adds a controller here. Now currently when I drag the Falloff controller over them, nothing happens. That's because we need to change the properties in the controller. So here it's added a Falloff scale property, and that's because when we created the Falloff modifier we had scale selected. So we can change now the scale here. If we up it to 10, 10, 10, maybe something more extreme because that's quite subtle. Let's try 50. So now when we drag our controller over them, they scale up nicely. Now the flip horizontal tool sounds very simple, and in effect it is. It just flips the layer horizontally, but what it also does is it flips the whole animation horizontally. So for example, this animation where I have this ball that is moving across the screen, if we clicked flip horizontal here, it's going to flip all of the keyframes at the point at which your playhead is. So let's just Control Z that a second. So if I click flip horizontal here, you can see here it's flipped all of the keyframes. If I reverse that and I click flip horizontal here, you see it reverses it in a different place. And that's actually quite powerful. It's quite simple but also quite powerful, and I can imagine a lot of things that you could do with that and save you a lot of tedious tasks. Flip vertical is the same principle. So if we click this circle again and we click flip vertical, you can see there it's flipping the animation on the vertical axis instead. So with this one example, I'm going to run through a lot of the smaller features. So for example, rename. If you want to rename a whole group of layers manually, it can be quite a pain. So the rename feature allows you to do that quite easily. So if we select all of our layers here and we click rename, we can choose a name like boxes or box. What it's going to do is it's going to call them like box 1, box 2, box 3. So we can choose the prefix and the suffix. I'm just going to leave them as a dash. We can choose the separator here, which is what it has after the name and before the number. So let's maybe use a plus, and we're going to put it after, and we're going to press rename. And there you go, box plus 1, box plus 2, box plus 3. It makes that super easy. Now, currently our animation is not doing anything. Maybe let's add some movement to it. Let's add a spin to one of these boxes. So if we select this bottom left box and we press spin, the spin tool allows you to simply just spin around a layer, which saves you a couple of clicks in manually animating it. And there's no keyframes involved, which makes it a lot nicer. It's just an expression that it adds to the rotation property. The reverse tool allows you to reverse the order of all of your layers. So if we wanted the box plus 1 to be at the top and box plus 9 to be at the bottom instead, press reverse. You can see that's what it does. The null feature allows you to automatically add a null parent to whichever layers you have selected. So say we want to control the middle row of boxes by itself. If we select the middle row here and we press null, now we have a null control which simply controls those 3. And then if we wanted to do the same with this row, we press null, and now we have a null that controls this 3. If we now wanted to have a null which controls the top 2 rows, we can select both the nulls that we already have, press null, and now we've got a null that controls those nulls. So I can move this here, then move that there. So the orbit feature allows you to get one object to rotate around another. So for instance, I have a circle here and I have many circles behind it. One of them is going to be the sun, and all the rest of them are going to be the planets rotating around the sun. So if we select the planet layers here and we press orbit, you can see now it's automatically got a circle that's moving around. There's actually 6 planets all moving around underneath this one. So we kind of want to offset them. So it's added a effect called position to each of these planets. And within properties, you can change the calibration, which is going to offset where it is in the orbit, like this. So if I just do that for the rest of them. And we can change the distance that they are from the sun by tweaking this distance property. We can also change the speed using the speed property. So that one's going to rotate a lot slower than the others. Let's move one of them a bit further out and slow it down a bit more, like this. You can also reverse the orbit by clicking reverse. So if you were wanting to create an animation like this saves you so much time. The parent tool allows you to parent one layer to another. I think it saves you one click basically, without having to use the pick whip or click this button here. So if we wanted to parent this white cube to the circle, we click the white cube and we click the circle and we click parent. And now they move around together. So the PinPlus tool allows you to parent nulls to your puppet pins, and that gives you a much higher degree of control over your puppeting animations. So for example, in this animation we have a flailing cylinder, and if we wanted to parent this circle to the end of the cylinder so it kind of moves around with it, I don't really know any way of doing that, because you cannot parent things to individual puppet pins as far as I'm concerned. Maybe with expressions you could, but not easily. So the best way to do this is to use PinPlus. So if you select this rectangle, for example, and we add some pins, now if we select all those pins and we click PinPlus, see it's added a bunch of nulls. Each of these represents one of the puppet pins. So you see if we move it around, it moves the object around. And now we can parent this shape layer to the pin. And now when we move this pin, it moves with it. So let's add some dynamics to this pin. Let's click dynamics. Now if we press play, it moves around with it. So the stare feature basically means get this object to look at this other object, no matter where the other object moves to. So for example, if we want to get this rectangle to always look at this null, let's select this rectangle and select this null. Actually, let's just select the rectangle and press stare. Now if we open up the effects panel for that rectangle, we click rotation, we select the target as the null, and let's set the calibration so that the calibration will just offset it. Let's set it so the pointy part of the rectangle is looking at the null here. And now if we move this null around, you can see that the cube also moves. So the text break tool allows you to split your text layers into multiple layers for each letter. So for example, we have a text layer here that says break me, and if we click text break and we click break, there it's added one layer for each of the letters, and then we can move them around separately. Let's undo that. Let's click on this second one, and let's change the mode down here to break words. Now you see that's actually broken the text into individual words for each shape rather than individual letters. So there's only 2 layers that it's created from that. Now the next tool we're going to be talking about is texture. I love this tool. It's often a bit of a faff to apply texture to layers. You kind of have to import the texture, you have to overlay it, you have to matte it to your object, mask it so it only appears where the object is. You end up with a bunch of layers. It's a real faff, but this tool simplifies it so much. So let's select this circle and click texture. And here there's a bunch of preset textures. You may be able to even add your own. I'm not sure, I could not find the information about that. But for now, there are a load of presets that we can choose. So let's choose something that's quite obvious so that we can see it. Let's choose this one maybe. And now it's added that texture to your object. Let's add a few to the others. You can see above each shape layer it's created a texture layer and it's locked it automatically. You can press E on the layer and you have a texture effect which you can toggle down, and there are a bunch of properties that you can tweak in here. You can tweak the scale, you can tweak the rotation of the texture and the position. You can add a delay, which means that when the object moves the texture will take a little while to catch up. And you can also, this is very cool, you can turn on dynamics, which basically wiggles the texture. So if I press play, you can see the texture's moving about like that. You can actually get a repeating texture look if you switch it to hold here. And this is a technique that a lot of people actually use in animation. It looks quite good to have a little looping animation texture like this, and this is such an easy, quick way of doing it. It's great. Trace allows you to draw a line behind a shape. You probably remember this composition that I showed you earlier for the blend feature, and we're just going to add the tracer to it. So if we simply click the circle and we click trace, it now draws a line. And if you don't want the line to be affected by gravity, you can go into this tracer pre-comp that it's created. You can tweak the effects here under tracer. There's loads of options here. So for example, if we turn off gravity and we go back to our composition, and now you can see it's not affected by gravity. And you can tweak things like the color, the width, all of it. It's really very, very useful. Now, because for example, this plugin, when you click one of these features, it usually adds a bunch of complicated expressions to your layers. It can be quite faff to remove them. So this is what the trash feature does. So for example here under position we can see we have an expression which is the blend expression, and if we wanted to get rid of that, rather than having to manually go in and delete the expression and all of this stuff, we can click position and we can click trash, and you can see it's gotten rid of the expression. The object has gone back to moving its original trajectory, the non-blended trajectory. Trim simply saves you a few clicks. Normally if you wanted to add a trim paths, you would have to twirl down the layer, click add, click trim paths, and then you could in here tweak the trim. By using the trim feature you can simply click the layer and click trim, and that does the same thing. Vector allows you to draw lines between your layers. So if we select all of these circles here and we click vector, we have a bunch of choices here. We can either draw a line through each one of our layers, but not more than once. We can do one that is slightly different, but very, very close. This will simply just connect the final one to the start again, so it's a continuous loop. This tool here will connect every object to every other object. We won't use this here because we have so many objects that it would take ages. Let's try this middle one. And you can see there it's drawing a line between each layer. It's created a layer called vectors, and under effects we have all the controls that we need to change the color. So let's change the color to one of the brand colors like this one. Let's change the width of the stroke, and we can change the start and end taper for our lines by enabling variation and then tweaking the starting and ending properties. The vignette tool is very simple. All it does is add a vignette to your layer. So if you click vignette, you can see it's now added a sort of dark oval shaped vignette to the layer, and you can tweak all the properties in here. The warp tool allows you to create some liquidy effects between your layers when they touch each other or come close to each other. So for example, we have this animation here with some circles moving around. Sometimes they touch each other, sometimes they don't. So if we click this shape layer with all our groups within it and we click warp, you can see it's sort of created a liquidy effect here. It works better when the layers are the same color, like these two white, but you can still get a cool effect when they are different colors. Guys, if you want this plugin, you can download it using my affiliate code in the description. You get 10% off and I get a small commission, so you'd also be helping me out. I hope you can see now why you should be using Motion 3. To me, the current price is totally worth it for the amount of time and frustration it saves me. It's one of those plugins which just makes you think, why aren't these features in standard After Effects? I hope you found this tutorial useful, and as always, subscribe for more and hit that bell to be updated when I release a new video. Have a good one, guys.